Oh, hello everybody and welcome to another edition of the Mr. Warren Hayes Show. I, of course, am Mr. Warren Hayes, and we are going to be talking about professional wrestling for a while right here on youtube.com/Mr. Warren Hayes or on your favorite podcast application, wherever you decide to consume all of your favorite listening habits, and I'm privileged to be part of those habits. Thank you very much. No, seriously, I appreciate it. I would also appreciate a like here on YouTube or a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or a 5-star rating on Spotify, just to help out, just to help grow the podcast, get people in the know a little more. That kind of stuff would be tremendous and would go a long way. It would go a long way. Just like tonight, we're going to go a long way, or as long as we can, I guess. Just a couple of topics. Of course, we're going to do another G1 weekly recap. Probably the last real long form recap we're going to do, as there's only like 4 nights of block action left. We're coming to a close here with the G1 Climax 35. So we're going to do a little bit of that tonight. We're going to talk about a certain return to professional wrestling over there in WWE again. Oh boy, and Cody Rhodes. Oh yeah, it's a fun-filled night of excitement and treasure here on the Mr. Warren Hayes Show. So thank you all very much for being here. Let's get right to it. This past weekend was WWE SummerSlam, and on the night 2, August 3rd, 2025 show, at the very end, Brock Lesnar made a surprise return to WWE at the end of the show, receiving a raucous, loud reaction from the 50,000 or so assembled in New Jersey. His return followed John Cena's farewell. Well, his farewell after John Cena lost the title to Cody. He was in the ring and he was, doing, hey, I'm sorry, I'm back. I'm a babyface. I didn't see the match. A lot of people saying that it's John Cena's best match literally in years. And as he was standing there, suddenly Brock shows up, hits the ring, and delivers an F5 to old Cody Rhodes and, to old John Cena. And the wrestling world is left reeling. As everyone sort of has, everyone has an opinion about that. And look, the amount of discussion and discourse that this has created is immense, and it mostly revolves around the fact that Brock Lesnar was named multiple times, over 40 times, in Janelle Grant's amended complaint, which I believe she filed, I can't quite remember, earlier this year, I think, when more texts and more information was added, including the presence of Brock Lesnar, who was mentioned, like I said, easily over 40 times. Look, we got to start by saying this, by being very, very clear about it, right? Brock Lesnar is not a defendant in the Janelle Grant lawsuit, okay? He is named over 40 times. I believe the number is 44, if I remember correctly. He's named 44 times in the lawsuit, and the lawsuit alleges that Vince McMahon and John Laurinaitis attempted to traffic Grant to Lesnar as part of contract renegotiations to get Lesnar to re-sign with WWE, basically promising Janelle as an incentive, as a bonus for signing. Textbook definition of sex trafficking. We're not going to get into the nitty gritty details and all the nuts and bolts. We're not going to open up the lawsuit and break all of this down. But trigger warning for anyone who can who might be affected by descriptions of sexual abuse. Nonetheless, some of the claims that were made inside the lawsuit include the following. Grant was pressured to send explicit images and videos to Lesnar. Lesnar allegedly requested a video of Grant urinating. He attempted to arrange meetings with her that didn't occur due to certain circumstances. And there's no confirmation within the information that we have here that there was indeed a physical sexual encounter. Now, I'm talking about this because I feel it's really foolish that we'd have to break down this information here and talk about why people are upset. Okay? I think it's rather poisonous to think that there are people who, just can't understand why people are upset and why you should be upset ultimately too. That's the thing, right? Because, the main point of contention, of course, is that Lesnar didn't do anything illegal, right? And, and the main defense is, Lesnar might not have been aware of what was going on with the, might not have been aware of all the coercion involved in this whole situation, right? Since it's not clearly established in the lawsuit itself. So I understand, but I think it's also reasonable for people to wonder just how much he did know about Grant's relationship with McMahon and how abusive it was, allegedly abusive it was. How much did Brock know about the coercion? How much did he know? How much did he know Vince was pushing her or not? How much did he think this wasn't forceful? But, rather, two people in an open relationship and everyone seemed okay with it. How much did he know? Right? So a lot of people are saying, maybe he didn't know all of this stuff, right? But I think it's just as fair to say, maybe he did know how deep it went. Because it goes both ways. If you're ready to stick up and say, well, maybe he didn't know, well, you kind of have to accept the idea that, well, you know what, maybe he didn't. Maybe he did know. Maybe he didn't know really how deep this relationship was. He was a good pal of Vince's. They were friends. I don't think it's out of the ordinary. And that's where it's from this position, I think, that most people who are very upset about Brock showing up in WWE come from, right? I think that's their situation. That's where they're coming from. They're coming from a moral and ethical perspective as opposed to a legal one, okay? Because again, let's repeat it. Brock is not a defendant in this case. He's not being sued. He's been named in the lawsuit. So the chimes of he didn't do anything illegal still didn't mean he didn't do anything wrong, right? So if someone gaslights their ex, right, into believing she was a bad person throughout all the relationship and, they were the reason why everything fell apart, that's not illegal, but it's still wrong. It's still something you shouldn't do, right? It's kind of like, let's say you're 45 years old and you're dating someone who's 17 years old, but she's in the UK. So, and that's legal, right? So, because the age of majority in the UK is 17. So again, you're not doing anything illegal, but holy fuck, is that questionable behavior regardless. So the moral weight of Brock being involved and elaborating plans to get this done, to meet up and get it done, doesn't dissipate, doesn't just all go away because he hasn't been found guilty. Does that make sense? But for the Brock or WWE defenders, right? That's all they need. They don't need anything else. There's no more right or wrong in this circumstance. It's just legal or illegal. And so it's not illegal, All right, what's the problem then? No problem. He just ended up sexting a girl, who just happened to be not his wife, which, by the way, by definition, is wrong. But not wrong enough to lose your career over, apparently. But still, it's like it's still wrong, but not huge wrong. So they're basically just sexted a girl that wasn't his wife, and that's it. That's the worst. That's probably the worst part of this whole scenario. And yet there's no skepticism that remains. There's no curiosity that remains in this circumstance. People are not trying to think further. They're not trying to think deeper into this. It's just like, okay, no, that's all it probably can be, right? But I find it difficult, friends, viewers, listeners, I find it difficult to have to erase skepticism in regards to WWE when WWE is a company which has given us more than enough reason to be skeptical in regard to its own moral compass, its own moral issues, right? The Ring Boys, Nancy Argentino, Rita Chatterton, Ashley Massaro, right? And isn't it interesting? I just rattled off like 3 women's names here, just pointing that out. What about bringing Hulk Hogan back? Sure, being a racist isn't illegal, but and what about hiring, very recently, not one of the most recent things, in fact, right? Hiring Lee Fitting after he was fired from ESPN for toxic and inappropriate behavior. How can you not reserve? You look at the body of work, essentially, okay? You look at the precedents that already exist with this company. How can you not reserve some doubt for this fucking company that has a track record for not doing the right thing ever? And they know what kind of trouble they were in when it was revealed over the weekend, not announced ahead of time, just bloop, arrived over the weekend. They knew they were in trouble when it was revealed that there would be no post-match pressers at SummerSlam this year. And in fact, they'd be done for the foreseeable future. Right? Journalists, or at least, media people, let's call them that, showed up to SummerSlam. Some of them flew in, some of them drove, miles upon miles or kilometers upon kilometers, to get to Jersey and take part, only to be told when they were picking up their credentials, hey, there's not going to be any pressers. Okay. They knew they were in trouble. They knew exactly what they were doing by bringing Brock in. If they were so fucking confident that Brock was, free of any, bad intent, that anything could be countered, that then they'd still have the pressers, right? They'd still have the pressers, but they decided to wipe them. They didn't want to risk any questions. No, when I say they, Paul Levesque, that craven, cowardly man, couldn't even bring himself to take questions from the softest media pool on earth. Okay, we're not even talking of a press pool that includes, Brandon Thurston's or John Pollock's or Lucas Charpiot. None of these people. We're talking people, just the softest, like the people who sit there and and all they want to do is be a part of the show, and they clap along and they raise their fingers to acknowledge the tribal chief and all that bullshit, right? You don't think WWE's not self-aware? You don't think they don't know what's up here? You don't think they don't know exactly what they're doing here? When you're too chicken shit, and specifically in in Paul Levesque's, specifically in Paul Levesque's case here, if you're too chicken shit to take questions from fucking influencers who start up their questions saying, hey, what up, legend? What the fuck kind of soft son of a bitch are you? Oh, you know, here on the program, we take great pleasure in dressing down Paul Levesque and shattering the myth of Papa Paul, right? So this all connects here. It's not just about Brock Lesnar. It's about this whole reaction that WWE has had here. WWE, excuse me, Triple H, Paul Levesque, he can't answer any questions. That's why. That's the reason why. Because he can't answer these questions. He can't answer these hard questions because he falls apart. Because he doesn't know what to do. You remember when they asked him, you know, in one of the rare occasions where he was asked a real question and they asked him about the lawsuit, what is it now, 2-3 years ago when it first came out? I haven't read it yet. Like, that's a terrible answer. It's a terrible answer. And every time he gets confronted like that, he can't answer. He just wants to be told how great he is. He wants to continue cosplaying as he has for the past 25 years. He wants to continue cosplaying like he's some bigwig in professional wrestling, like he's this big monumental figure. He wants to continue that. He wants people to pat him on the back. He loves being referred to as, hey, legend. Of course he loves that. But he cannot answer these questions. Look, during the SummerSlam stuff, right? During the SummerSlam media tour, I should say, to be very precise, he was on a UK sports podcast, right? What was it called? The Sports Agents, right? Something to that effect. And the host finally, the host asked him a question about Vince McMahon, about the allegations. Finally, right? Finally asking Paul Levesque, after all this time, a direct question about the allegations, right? And by the way, parentheses, the guy asked him the question about, you know, Vince McMahon had to step away amidst all these allegations. You know, how did you guys pivot creatively from that? And I'm like, motherfucker, no one understands that WWE is being sued as well. It's not just Vince. It's not the Vince McMahon lawsuit. It was the Vince McMahon John Laurinaitis WWE lawsuit. Now it's just the Vince McMahon WWE lawsuit because John Laurinaitis pussied out. He turned against Vince and WWE. So he gets asked a question. Back to our original topic. Outside of the media that does not seem to understand that WWE is also being sued here. Back to our topic. Or this bit here. He goes on the Sports Agents UK, all right? And they ask him the question. The guy asks him the question to Triple H, to Paul Levesque, about Vince McMahon's allegations. And our boy Paul just crumbled. He came undone, folks. He said, you know what? Instead of, I'm just going to show it to you. We're just going to look at it together. Give me a second here. Let me pull this up so that you can, and not only, you will hear the question, in case you haven't seen this clip, you will hear the question that the Sports Agent UK dude asks, all right? And you'll see I'm not full of shit when I say that, you know, people don't even understand the nature of the lawsuit. Listen to this.
And the challenges were that inevitably in the last year, serious allegations of sexual assault and trafficking levied at Vince, which he's always denied. But nevertheless, how did you deal with the fallout of all that? Because they were allegations.
Weird question. How did you deal with that? Because they were allegations. Yes. Okay. Not only allegations, he's been taken to court. And not only, you see what I mean what I'm saying? Not only is the question a little, you know, it's dancing around the subject. It's like, you know, sex trafficking, sexual abuse, but it's not just Vince. It's not just Vince. It's WWE. The question should have been, how do you, as WWE, how do you feel WWE has enabled Vince to do this? Because that's the idea, or something to that effect. Anyway, you heard the question, okay? Watch how our boy Paul falls apart.
Sure. And all we can do is move forward. For us as a company, creative,
Sure. All we can do is move forward as a company creative. He is in complete distress right now.
All we can do is move forward. And allegations are allegations, right? It's a complicated relationship for anybody in life.
It's allegations are allegations. It's a complex relationship for anyone in life. No, not really. Because most people don't have to deal with allegations because most people are not fucking sex pests. They're not sex trafficking rapists. So no, Paul, if you're trying to appeal to me to try to relate to what you're saying, relationships, they're complicated. It's not like sitting with your Uncle Stu, at Thanksgiving, who's already down a full bottle of whiskey and you have to deal with him talking about his politics for the next 3 hours. That's a complicated relationship. This is different.
For anybody in life, nobody is perfect.
Nobody is perfect. Gee willikers. Nobody's perfect. Sorry, honey, I forgot our anniversary this year. That's okay. I still love you. Nobody's perfect. Nobody's perfect. Nobody's perfect.
But accusations are made, and that's a whole legal thing that is totally separate and aside from what we do.
It's completely over here. It's just so far away from all we do. I don't know. I'm just a guy who works 8 hours a day on creative. I just write 8 hours a day, except when I have to go to the White House. When I'm invited to go to the White House, then I have to stop writing a little bit. But it's all over here. It's so far away. I can't even see it. Let me call Jim in legal just to figure out exactly how far it is.
My job is to put on the best creative product that WWE can do. And, luckily and happily, it's been successful and it's been working wonderfully. Business is in an incredible place now and continuing to grow.
And then he flips to the platitudes. Now he flips to the platitudes just to reinforce the idea that, look, Vince is gone. And since then, we're doing fantastic business.
Especially with our partners at Netflix and NBC and CW.
And look at all of our great partners. Look, if we were a sex trafficking operation, Mr. Interviewer, this is what he's saying. So if we were a sex trafficking operation, Mr. Interviewer, do you think the CW and Netflix and NBC would be working with us, partners in our business? No, of course not. It's just preposterous what you're saying, sir. These are all prepared. These are all prepared statements. At the very least, Paul is much more a little more media trained than the one time he got blindsided. Well, the couple of times he got blindsided, especially by Lucas Charpiot.
And everyone in between. It's a wonderful time in our business and fans are enjoying it. So we're headed in a good direction.
That's just looping. It's preposterous stuff. And he's so nervous and his mind is spinning 1,000 miles an hour. He is not in a good spot. You can see in his eyes. He's scrambling. He's looking elsewhere. He's trying to collect his thoughts. He's not in a good spot right now. My company's being sued for enabling Vince and his sex trafficking deals and his sexual abuse. Nobody's perfect. What do you want from me? But again, look, proof that he's a coward and knows exactly what he's getting himself into with Brock, okay? You want a little more? Here's the proof. So he goes after he's done with the show, they go do this little post show that they have now instead of doing the media thing, right? And he sits down there and he says, he says outwardly, it's Cena who wanted this. Cena's the guy who wanted Brock. He wanted Brock on his last tour, and so we gave him Brock. That's essentially it. So, what he's successfully done is create himself another Shield something else that he can hide behind and deflect if and when this all goes south. Just like he did with The Rock and TKO, right? Now he can blame Cena, right? And this man, he is incredible. Like, he's incredible. He cannot bear any form of criticism. He cannot bear to be in the center of anything that is not outright praising him or WWE or what he's doing. It's insane. He'll trot himself out for the big pops. You know, he'll start off the show, he'll grab the microphone and, "Are you ready?" You know, kind of thing. He'll get all of that set up. He'll get all of that done. He'll hop into the ring, you know, and he'll even have his nice little pet projects just for him. He'll develop this nice little WWE Unreal, right? He'll get all of that done just for him. It'll be just for him. But then the minute that we have any kind of anything confrontational, right? Anytime something confrontational will show up. So look, essentially, he got scared. He got scared and he shut down these pressers, you know, just out of pure fear that a Lucas Charpiot might pop out of nowhere, right? Again, even though the press pool, if you want to call it that, the media pool is incredibly soft and pro WWE, right? Just like everywhere online, right? Just like online. Look, they get bent out of shape for Tony Khan tweeting too much, though, right? Oh, they're going to get so upset with Triple H, Tony Khan, excuse me, you know, tweeting a little too much, you know. But Brock shows up. Oh, ain't nothing to see here. They'll scream, you know. They'll call you wokes. Those dorks online will defer any well-deserved skepticism from decades of WWE fuckery, and they will draw the line at too much tweeting or arguing about ratings or how many belts Mercedes Moné has, or, you know, all this bullshit. He did nothing illegal, they'll say. I don't care. That's not the point. That is not the point. I have been exposed to decades of scum behavior from WWE that has been coming to a head over the past couple of years. So I am more enough in a position to not give any of these scumbags the benefit of the doubt. They had opportunities to do the right thing, and they could have distanced themselves from Vince. You know, all of these defenders, WWE, right? WWE had these opportunities to do the right thing. They could have distanced themselves from Vince once the lawsuit was filed, but instead of putting down a statement and creating a barrier and saying, look, this is not the same place anymore, and so on and so forth, they decide to cozy up to Vince instead. Instead, no public explanations, no comments, cancel the press conference, bring back problematic figures. And this is all in the playbook of TKO regardless, right? It's not as if WWE is doing something that's completely unprecedented with its new ownership, right? TKO, Dana White, Conor McGregor, John Jones. It's part of the corporate culture for this company. All of this shit, you know, the complete disregard for basic human morality, empathy. It's just not there. And here's the thing that's most distressing, okay? Here's the thing that is absolutely most distressing. This is not going to change anything. And that's the thing. Not as long as they keep filling up, not as long as they keep filling up 50,000 stadiums 2 nights in a row, right? And they keep their ratings up and they keep getting these big media deals. and the fans keep coming out in droves, and the media stays cooperative, until TKO's bottom line gets touched, absolutely nothing of this is going to change. Nothing here is going to change. And as for Brock, if you are upset about Brock Lesnar showing back up in pro wrestling, you are allowed to feel upset about it, because it is upsetting. It is amoral. It is not right. It is not good. It might be legal, but it's still not good. WWE does not deserve the benefit of the doubt here. They don't, because they have consistently shown over decades upon decades that that the worst possible outcome is typically the one they favor. So there you go. Those are my thoughts on Brock Lesnar returning and what it means overall. Because I don't give a shit ultimately whether Brock Lesnar is not going to be on my TV, because I don't watch the program. But I'm not dumb enough to not understand the implications of this to a degree. Anywho, those are my thoughts on the Brock Lesnar thing. I had a feeling that WWE was going to do everything in their power to make people forget about the whole situation with Vince, but then they got a rude awakening when they brought Brock back last night. One last thing maybe I'd add here before wrapping this up, because the comment just made me think about this. What if we're just setting the stage here? What if we're just dipping our toes in the water to see how this goes? Because we've got something else lined up, right? We've got something else that we'd like to trot out. Because look, if morality becomes negotiable, then, let's move on. Why not bring Vince back? I mean, if we're ready to overlook everything that's happened to Brock because nothing illegal, right? I would be concerned that this is not some kind of that this is not just like setting the stage a little bit, dipping our toes in the water, seeing what we can do here. Because if we're bringing Brock back, there might be something else waiting in the wings to happen. We're going to talk about Cody Rhodes. Well, once again, a top WWE superstar on a media run for the company, for WWE, heading into a huge event, a huge 2-night event. Once again, a top WWE superstar is going to take time out of that media tour to talk about AEW once more. And of course, Cody Rhodes once again talks about AEW. Now, I've listened to the audio, full disclosure. We're not jumping in blind here. I've already shared some thoughts on Blue Sky about it. The idea that what we have here is that Cody is talking about leaving AEW in ways that he really hasn't in the past. Like early after his departure, and the couple of times he talked about, he was very cordial. He was very cordial. He didn't bring up any things. Everything seemed amicable. But now, well, he head on over to the Ringer, and he had some stuff to say. I don't know who interviewed him. I don't know who the Ringer people are. You'll have to forgive me on that one. But we got a little. Let's listen. Let's listen into to the old codesters here, and this supercut of how things finished off in AEW, and yeah, of course, we're going to comment as we go along. Here we go.
There's clearly bad blood, but there's also clearly respect.
So there's clearly bad blood. Clearly no, because no one has ever said that there was bad blood. Not Kenny, not the Bucks. Maybe the Bucks insinuated that things got a little weird with Cody in their book, but they never outright said. But I also, no one ever said that there was bad blood. So clearly no one's ever spoken about it because wrestlers never want to talk on record about anything. They just want to talk in vagaries and add more vagaries on top of their stuff. They never want to talk about facts. Then it's like, it's like when Miro was like, and you'd be like, oh, the information is out there. No, it's not, Miro. When he was being pestered about his contract situation, the information is out there. Just talk on the record about something and people will stop speculating. You big dope. It's the same thing with all pro wrestlers, but it's also part of the game too, because a lot of them do talk to the journalists, but then they will, front facing to the public, they'll never admit it, or they'll hold, an entirely different discourse, right? So listen, let's continue. Oh, I know what the Ringer is. Trust, no. To be clear, I know what the Ringer is. I just don't know who the host, who's interviewing. Is it Bill Simmons? I honestly don't know. I have never listened to a minute of Bill Simmons, and I know he's like this. He's a huge media dude, sports media dude. I know that. I know the brushstrokes, but I couldn't pick him out of a lineup. That's on me. Most of his topics don't interest me. I'm not into pro sports, so I guess if I were into pro sports, I'd probably know who Bill Simmons is. I'd probably go, well, yeah, there he is. But I couldn't pick him out of a lineup. So yeah, clearly bad blood. No, not really. This is the first we're really hearing about it. Speculation, etc., of course. But speculation is not clarity. That's just rumor and talk and innuendo.
And love. And in the end, the way I kind of see it is, if I felt disrespected ever at WWE, that's one thing. That's a company that was built. Look at this glass. That's the Yankees. That's the flagship of it all.
The Yankees didn't make the glass, but I get what he's talking about.
Felt there, I was a number on a sheet maybe. But feeling disrespected at something I built, with my friends and that we built, feeling disrespected there, I wouldn't stand for it. And I think Brand.
Okay, I'm just gonna. I love that they use the Global Force championship picture here. They're doing everything they can to not post pictures of Cody in Ring of Honor or in New Japan, or you know what I mean? Or definitely not in AEW. They're trying to skirt all the partners. This is a very sad statement, and one which I have trouble adhering to, and I don't think anyone should. I don't think this is a message anyone should aspire to. It's okay for me to be disrespected because I'm a number in a company. I'm just a number. I'm not a real person. So it doesn't matter if I'm that is a wild fucking statement. That is wild. It was okay that I was disrespected in WWE because I didn't build it. Christ. All right. That is bananas as far as statements go. I was a number on a sheet. No one really cared. You can disrespect the numbers. We're not really people there. Also, it's a fucking indictment, right? On how WWE is run. If you're disrespected, you're just a cog in the machine. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if Vince gets in your face and screams at you for 5 minutes because you didn't use the right inflection on a specific word, or because you were supposed to throw a clothesline and instead you did a big boot or something like that. Now I can understand the part where he's saying, if I'm being disrespected in something that I built, that I can't stand for. And I agree with him. If I were to, if I had built, let's say, the Mr. Warren Hayes show, the podcast with, let's say, my friends, three other of my friends, and it's, they work behind the scenes, they do all sorts of production shit, but I'm like the guy. I'm the guy in front of the camera. I'm doing all this shit, and I'm working hard. I'm working, they're working hard. Everyone's working hard, but they don't respect me, and they're making me feel, they're disrespecting me. I'm like, what the fuck is this? This is, I built this. My name is on it. This is fucking shit. I'd understand that. So I can get that. But I wonder what this disrespect is. Let's continue a little more.
And I think Brandy and I both...
Why is suddenly Brandy being brought up in this notion of disrespect? Why Brandy? Huh?
I'm so...
That came out of nowhere.
Blessed to have her. It was one of those where it was... I did way more here than you think. And you're going to find out the moment I'm out the door. I don't believe in like the cold.
So
I don't believe in like the cold-hearted, backstabby type of revenge. The greatest revenge on earth is success. And I felt like we were sitting on something wonderful, something great, a huge, potentially with what I was doing with the American Nightmare as a bad guy, as a good guy, as something.
Come on now, Cody. You were never a bad guy. You never wanted to be a bad guy in AEW. What are we doing here?
In between, we're sitting on something magic. And if I'm not going to do it in the house that I literally, with Matt, Nick, and Kenny built, then buddy, I'm going elsewhere.
Okay. So this is the part where I absolutely cannot get behind. This is something that they couldn't even force feed me to swallow. I can't. This is something I can't accept. I straight up don't believe it. Don't forget one thing. Cody Rhodes, he's a professional wrestler, and he grew up with old timers. He keeps saying it. That was his entire brand for a while, right? That he's the young guy, but he's got, he's got the spirit of the territories in him, right? So what did he learn from the spirit of the territories? Well, he learned how to lie. He learned how to work the marks. That's just fine. Yeah. This is nothing new about Cody. Cody is a liar. Okay? So, here's the thing. When he says that I was disrespected and I couldn't stand for it, you're like, what was the disrespect? And what he's essentially saying in the rest of this snippet says, fuck it. I did more here than you imagine. I can do more anywhere else. So if I'm not going to be able to do something great here in AEW, then I'm just going to go elsewhere. Right? He's saying this as if his hand had been forced to go to WWE. That he had no other recourse. This is what he's saying. Because there was disrespect. Now, we can speculate on what the disrespect is. Okay? I have no answers for you. You don't have an answer for me either. All we have is conjecture and rumors, whatever the chatter is, obscure reports. Nothing concrete, because again, none of these wrestlers ever talk on record, and then they wonder why people clamp on to the rumors and whatnot. But I think that if you put things together, there's a falling out that happened with Tony Khan, and that's what pushed Cody finally to make the decision to finally go to WWE. And I do say finally go to WWE, but we'll revisit that. And I think one of the crucial elements that adds a fuck ton of weight to this idea that he had a falling out with him is because Tony decided to not exercise the option that he had on Cody's contract. Remember when Cody wanted to leave, he could have left. He was ready, he was ready to go, but he had a year's option, and Tony Khan decided to not exercise the option. That to me means that whatever issues there were, they were high up. I'm not saying that he didn't have issues with the Jacksons or Omega. I don't know. But the boss, instead of clamping him down for a year with an extra, by extending his contract, which he could have, instead said, no, we're good. And I don't know how terrible that disrespect was either. There's that on one hand. Then on the other hand, I wonder how terrible the disrespect was, because from everything that we've understood from this situation of Cody, when Cody left a couple of years ago, he was working on a handshake deal before officially leaving, before walking out the door. He did his last few dates, his last few appearances on honor with a handshake, passing the belt back to Sammy Guevara and all that shit. That he was no longer under contract with AEW. So again, you have to wonder how deep was this disrespect and how profound it was, because he does sound like a victim here. Do you agree, chat? in this circumstance here, he does sound like he's coming across as he does sound like he's coming across as a victim, like he was, to a degree, pushed out. Again, I think one of the most telling events is the option not being what's the word? I'm not renewed, but activated. Not accepting, not using the option, right? And that to me clearly indicates that there was an issue really at the top. There was an issue at the tippy top. I don't know why Brandy's thrown in here. We weren't talking about Brandy as far as I can tell. I'm pretty sure the interviewer didn't ask specifically to Cody, what happened when you and Brandy left? Because Brandy's not a public figure anymore. She's not doing anything right. Like she's doing something. She's raising a kid, but she's not doing anything in the public eye is what I'm trying to say. So who cares about Brandy? But, you put your ear to the ground, you hear some stuff. Brandy was, she was a heat magnet. She could rub people the wrong way. So was there something else going on? She was in, what was her position? She was marketing or something? She was the vice president of marketing, something to that effect. Was she getting the results? Maybe at some point you get an evaluation with your boss and your boss looks over your results and you're like, these results stink. These are not very good. And you have another evaluation and you're not improving. Well, your boss at some point is going to be like, all right, hit the bricks, pal. Right? Did that cause a stir? Chief Branding Officer. Yes, thank you. Look, all I'm saying is that it's weird that Brandy's brought up here out of nowhere, which leads me to believe that Brandy was part of this equation as well. There was something going on there with Brandy as well. Otherwise, this was clearly a slip by Cody, because you see how he picks it up. You see how he tries to pick it up, right? How he tries to, smooth talk his way out of it. God bless her. I'm so blessed having her, right? That's what he says. I'm so blessed to have her. And then he doesn't mention her again. And Brandy, and he takes a pause and he pauses, takes a breath, and he says, I'm blessed to have her. And then whoop, that's it. We don't talk about it again. That is a media trained answer to move away from something you don't want to talk about. It's his slip up. He fucked up. The interviewer wasn't asking him. He wasn't asking him about Brandy. He brought up the Brandy information voluntarily. So again, there was something going on. And if Brandy's involved, it was probably up in the higher echelons. Now, I've heard a bunch of stuff. You hear things about how Cody got upset when he found out how much CM Punk was being paid, and he confronted Tony Khan to ask him. He confronted Tony Khan in that aspect, wondering why he wasn't being paid as much as Punk. I think the answer was pretty clear at the time, but nonetheless, this is the kind of stuff that, yes, you know, that could be the disrespect. I'm not saying this is true, by the way. And this is like, these are like pure, unfiltered, unadulterated rumors, right? It's like, well, they are filtered because they are filtered, trust me. But like, I think this is something that's passed along on the internet quite a bit. People talk about this a bit. It's like, well, Cody sort of lost his shit when he found out how much money Punk was making, and TK refused to pay him that much. So Cody said, well, okay, I'll take a walk. And TK said, fine. Didn't struggle to fight to keep him. Didn't renew his option. Just let him go. Him and his wife. Him and his wife. They left as a pair, remember? So, you know, it could be that this was the nature of this disrespect. Sometimes it's money. Never underestimate the money. This could be the nature of the disrespect. Cody was like, well, if you're not going to pay me as much as this guy, I'm out of here. What I take umbrage with, the quibble I have in this circumstance, is when he starts giving the impression that he was forced to go to WWE, that they pushed him to do this action, that it was against his will. Let's listen to this language again, right?
And if I'm not going to do it in the house that I literally, with Matt, Nick, and Kenny built, then buddy, I'm going elsewhere. There's clear.
You see, this was this part too.
I did way more here than you think. And you're going to find out the moment I'm out the door. I don't believe in like the.
It's as if he's positioning himself where he's saying, I did not want to leave. They made me leave because I was not being respected. Right? And this is my quibble here. This is my quibble here. Because the reality is that Cody Rhodes' endgame was always to return to WWE. Was always to return to WWE in a bigger, better spot than he left it. That's why he went to Ring of Honor. He did the New Japan stuff, and he got friendly and chummy with the biggest stars on the indie circuit. And that turned out to be some of the biggest stars in Japan. And also just happened to be, well, eventually some of the biggest stars in the world. You know, that's what, you know, he's no dummy. He knew what he was up to. I'm not saying that they weren't friends for real. Don't get me wrong here. But he also knows what he's doing here. I don't think it's just a conniving thing. But his plan was unquestionably to return to WWE. So it's not as if he was disrespected to the point where it's not as if that he was disrespected to the point that he did something that he just couldn't bring himself to do. They pushed me out. They created the situation. All right, buddy, then I'll go do it elsewhere. You know what I mean? Because if by pure magic, AEW had managed to be like this incredibly successful promotion, like and reached the heights somehow magically within its first 4 to 5 years, had magically been able to compete directly with WWE, like was right up there, was dragging in billions of dollars and had all of the same exposure. Do you think Cody would leave? Do you think Cody would leave? No, because he could get the same thing at home. And we're talking even Steven. I'm not saying, oh, well, they had a good TV deal. No, I'm talking like if AEW had managed to get itself to the level of World Wrestling Entertainment, he wouldn't leave. But there was no way that was happening. It's just not realistic. And Cody wanted to go back to WWE to prove those people wrong and to prove Vince wrong. And when he sat down with Vince at his home and they talked things over, Vince was forced to admit that, yeah, We're going to bring you in and we're not going to touch your packaging, brother. Everything's fine. And he went in. He's, one of the company's biggest stars right now. That's unquestionable. And he's doing exactly what he wanted to do. This is exactly it. There was no way he was going to stay in AEW in the state that it was. And even today, he was going to leave. Whatever disrespect happened, whatever stuff happened, it just ended up expediting his departure from AEW. It just ended up making it happen faster. Maybe it would have happened in 7 years as opposed to 3, right? Was it 3, 4, something like that? Maybe it would have just, it just ended up happening more quickly than he had expected it. Because reasons, disrespect, whatever that means. And if you don't believe me that he always wanted to go back to WWE, look, his old undesirable to undeniable quote, that gimmick, it's code. It's code. It was there all along. Undesirable from whom? Who did not desire Cody Rhodes? WWE. To undeniable. Undeniable for who? For WWE. That was his goal all along. People thought that when he was, hitting it big on Ring of Honor and then starting up AEW, people were going, there, you see, he's undeniable, but not for Cody. Cody's measuring stick was WWE. He wanted to go back to Vince and say, you have to rehire me now because now I am undeniable. And Vince was forced to admit it. Like, yep. Come back in, pal. That's just how fucking fascinating all of this is. Cody's target was always to go back to WWE. Whatever happened when he left, again, I think it just expedited his departure, made it go away, made him want to leave faster than had he decided to stay. Maybe he'd still be here. Maybe he'd be wrapping up his run and he'd be about to leave for WWE at this point. Maybe. I can't tell you. I couldn't tell you. But isn't it interesting that as it stands right now, he's there. Everything's going great. He has everything he wants. And some people are saying, oh, he's working. He's setting everything up for his return to AEW. And maybe for a while, if you would have asked me, you would have said, Warren, what do you think about Cody coming back to AEW? For a long time, I would have told you, oh yeah, he's going to come back. whatever it's going to take, right? It eventually, water under the bridge. People are just going to see dollar signs. They're going to see money. So they're going to be like, sure, he'll come back. He'll come back to the place he built, and he's going to come back as a hero, as a fucking megastar on top of that. And I would argue that Cody would probably drain fan interest as well back into AEW. For a while I would have thought that. Then my opinion shifted to, well, it all depends on his relationship with Tony Khan. I really feel like there was something that was soured there. I don't know what it is. I have no speculation on it, but I feel, well, I do, because we were talking about money. So I think it is a money issue ultimately. But I have no facts to base myself on. I've got nothing outside of observable events and reports, right? Because again, like Tony didn't exercise the option. That to me is very telling. I think there is whatever soured, I think it soured most, if not exclusively, with Tony. And if they are able to mend their bridge, which they probably could, because it's pro wrestling, I think that I think it could be possible for Cody to return. I still think that, but I feel like a return seems like a little less improbable, from from gathering up speculation and things that Cody has said about his contract, there's a lot of people who seem to think that he will be up at some point in 2026. So we'll see how that continues, that moves on. We'll keep an eye on that story, of course. If Cody were to jump back to AEW in 2026, that would be a huge deal. That would be a huge boon and a hell of a hit for WWE. At the same time, TKO is going to throw everything at Cody, everything to keep him. He's a top guy and he's perceived as a top guy. So they're not going to let him go. They're not going to let him go into the night easily. If he does decide to negotiate and, bounce things back and forth, right? So, it'll be an interesting year. It'll be interesting to keep an eye on at the very least. But the more things advance, the more I'm not so sure. My gut is not as confident as it was once before. Where I was like, Cody Rhodes is going to be back. He'll return to AEW. Not this soon. I don't think. Not yet. I think he's still going to go for more of this. Or, here's another thing that's very important. Cody's a very smart guy and he keeps his ear to the ground. If he realizes that the WWE universe is starting to get fatigued of him and is starting to get, they said, if he starts to feel that they have enough of him, he'll leave. He'll be like, okay, we're good. And he'll walk out the door. And he'll go to another place, the second biggest promotion in North America, in the world really, and be treated like a superstar there instead. He's a smart guy. He's a smart guy like that. So, look, it's all speculation, of course, but it's going to be a very interesting story to follow. But as it stands for his comments here, just as a wrap up, he said it himself. There's bad blood. Clearly, no, it wasn't really that clear, but thank you for clearing that up. So there's bad blood with whom? Well, we can speculate. I think the safest assumption is with Tony Khan himself. There was disrespect. What was the reason? I believe that that it was something over money. There was probably other little things, and probably the money situation pushed it overboard. And that also included things that probably involved the little things that satellited over the money issue, the other little issues that may have existed. I think Brandy was one of those, which would also explain why he brought up Brandy out of nowhere, which also justifies why they both left together. I think there was a lot of combustible elements there, but I think money was the issue that pushed it over. Then he went to WWE, but in no way, shape, or form did he feel like this was his only option and I had to do it because this was his plan all along. That is what Cody wanted all along, to have the opportunity to go back to WWE from being undesirable in the company to now being undeniable. Again, it was coded for us. His plan was there all along. It was there all along, and it came to fruition. So I think that's what I glean out of this fantastic interview. There you go. Or at least this bit of the interview. But look, again, with WWE's people talking about AEW on their own media tours. Let's head on over to New Japan Pro Wrestling now and talk about the G1 Climax 35. Time to recap the last week of events. That's what we're going to do here, just like I did last week, where I recapped the week previous. Now this week, we're going to recap from July 30 to August the 5th. I'm recording this on the 5th. I've watched the matches that happened today on the 5th, so I'm all caught up, all up to date, ready to talk about nights 8 to 12, which took place in that period. We are in the final stretch of the G1, folks. We are very, very close to the end because there are 4 nights of block action left. So 2 nights per block. Block A's 2 last nights are going to be on August 7th in Corkin Hall, and then on August 10 at the G-Mess Gunma. The G-Mess Gunma, not exactly a venue you hear quite a bit of. It's not exactly your most famous destination for classic G1 action. The G-Mess Gunma, and so that'll be the last 2 nights for Block A. And as for Block B, August the 8th at the Budokan, might have heard of that one, and on August 13th at the Act City Hamamatsu, probably my favorite Japanese city to say out loud, to pronounce, Hamamatsu, Hamamatsu. It's always there's something very satisfying in saying that name, Hamamatsu. That's tremendous. And then after that, when we're done with the, so basically that's it. 7, 8, 10, and 13th of August are the last 4 nights of block action. Then after that, on August 14, we go back to Corkin Hall for the playoffs, which will all take place on August 14. August 16, then we head to the Ariake Arena for the semifinals. And then on August 17, the final match of the G1 Climax, again, at the Ariake Arena. So we'll be spending 2 nights back to back there. So that's what's upcoming. But as it stands for right now, what we're going to do here in the moment, in the, living and breathing right now, we're gonna talk about the last week of action, just like I did last week. We're not gonna get into match details. I'm not gonna review every match or whatever. Big picture thoughts. We're gonna talk. Of course, we're gonna talk standings, and then some match recommendations. Then some match recommendations at the end to wrap all of this up for this week. So next week, effectively, I'll be doing another recap, but it's going to be a little on the light side. I'm sure you all understand why, but nonetheless, hopefully there'll be enough stuff, however, that will have happened so that I can really dig into the meat and bones of it, so I can start pulling apart some stuff. Because otherwise it's going to be rather light. There's not going to be much to talk about. But look, that'll be next. That's my problem for next week. Right now, we've got some stuff to talk about. We have some things to chit chat about. And let's start with the standings for Block A. If you ask me, a complete and utter nonsense setup right now in Block A. Complete and utter nonsense. 5 people tied at the top of the block with 8 points. Yota Tsuji, Yuya Uemura, Evil, Bolton Oleg, and Ryohei Oiwa. And then 5 people tied for second place / the bottom of the pile at 6 points. Callum Newman, Hiroshi Tanahashi, Taichi, David Finlay, and Sonata. Warren, is anyone eliminated? No, that's the thing. No one is eliminated. There's no eliminations. There's no one to count out here. Everyone still has a shot at this. Everyone is still 100% in this tournament to try and qualify as the top 3. Look, we're going to get into the nitty gritty of this in a couple of seconds. Don't get me wrong. But I think this is bonkers. It's kind of wild. I'm not super into it. Admittedly, I am not super into this. As it stands for Block B, though, a little more of a different story, but we're not quite that far off. 3 people tied at the top: Ren Narita, Zack Sabre Jr., and Konosuke Takeshita with 10 points. Joe Maloney, Shota Umino, Yoshihashi, Great Okan, all come up next at 8 points. And then you have Shingo Takagi and El Phantasmo bringing up the rear at 6 points apiece. Of course, Gabe Kidd forfeit his matches. He's been removed from the tournament. So he finishes the tournament at 0 points. But if we're talking just active wrestlers, Shingo and El Phantasmo wrap up the bottom of the pile here. Unlike Block A, Block B does have some eliminations. El Phantasmo is out of the tournament, And so is Great-O-Khan, despite the fact that Great-O-Khan won his, or is at 8 points, I should say. He is done because he only has one match left. Because, as you recall, since Gabe Kidd forfeited his matches, New Japan then gave everyone their 2 points straight off the bat. So everyone has their Gabe Kidd 2 points involved in there. But on the next night of action for Block B, which is on night 14 on August the 8th, Great-O-Khan was supposed to fight Gabe Kidd. Of course, that's not going to happen. So he has the night off. So technically speaking, Great-O-Khan only has one night of action left, which would take him then to, which would take us to night 16, of course. He's only got one match left there. And so the best he can hope for is score 10 points. But it is very likely that it is very unlikely that there's going to be this huge logjam at 10 points. He's already stuck with some of the leaders. And he already has some of the leaders have eliminations over him. So he's out of the tournament. He's gone. He's done. Now, one thing I do want to point out is that on the broadcast today on New Japan World, Walker Stewart told us when Shingo Takagi, when Shingo, it's really difficult apparently to do the speaking thing. When Shingo lost his match today to Zack Sabre Jr., Walker Stewart said, well, that's it. Our boy's eliminated. And that's not true. Shingo does have a very plausible path, actually, to qualify for the playoffs. Between whether it happens or not is a whole different scenario. We might talk. We will talk a little bit about advancement scenarios a little later on. Maybe not the way you're expecting, though. But Shingo's not eliminated yet. It all came together chatting around with Chris Samsa earlier today. It was like, oh shit, yeah, that's right. He does have a path forward. So those are the standings right now. And, as you can tell, as I sort of, as we broke everything down, there's log jams everywhere. Everyone is tied. There's no one that's, a clear winner and whatnot. I got to tell you what it turns out. Here's this for a big picture thought as we're closing out the G1 this year. This parity booking, parity, not parody, not P-A-R-O-D-Y. No, P-A-R-I-T-Y. Parity. I know it can be mush mouth sometimes, so I want to be careful. All this parity booking that New Japan has been doing for the past couple of years for the G1 is not interesting. It's not fun. I'm sorry to say. Like, at this point in past G1s, we should be sitting around and coming up with all sorts of scenarios for who is going to advance and whatnot, who's going to win the block at the very least, right? Back in the day when there was just one block winner, right? Now we got the playoffs. It's fine. But even with the playoffs, like there's so much stuff in here that there's so many log jams here that you can't get a really good grasp onto what's going to happen and who you should be excited for. There's no drama. Essentially, there's no drama as a viewer where you're just watching this all happen and you're like, oh, well, everyone's up at 6, everyone's at 8. You've got 4 guys at 8, 3 guys at 10. You're like, all right. It's not exciting. It's much more exciting. Look, there was a moment in this tournament early on 2 weeks ago when Yoshihashi was like the block leader. And you're like, holy shit, Yoshihashi's pulling away. And that was exciting. That was for a short while anyway, was an interesting story. But then everyone started to catch up. And now everyone, especially in Block A, is all like in this bundle. So there's no drama to this. There's no like big stakes. Nothing to keep you on the edge of your seat for the entirety of the tournament. Now, as we get to the last couple of nights, and particularly the last night of A block this year, everything on the last night of A block is going to matter, I would assume, to a degree, at the very least, right? Everything is going to matter. So that, I guess, adds some spice to want to watch, the final night of competition. But in the meantime, there's just all this stuff happening, and you're like, well, it takes away a lot of the interest as a viewer, as a spectator of a very sports-based pro wrestling tournament, because there's no one to look out for. There's no one that's grabbing the attention, that's moving forward, right? So, that's the thing. And that's the thing. Everyone is bunched up, so no one is standing out. No one is taking that spot that you would imagine, someone that New Japan had their faith in would be able to take. Because ultimately what this tells me right now, if, just looking at the setup and how all of these blocks are booked right now, the assumption, the message that it gives me is that there is no one this company has faith enough in to just be like, here's a guy in block A and here's another guy in block B. Watch these guys go. And I'm not saying that they necessarily have to run through the block, but they don't have to do, the typical Gedo, like the Yoshihashi run this year, where you have a great run of 4 matches and then you lose them all. And no one was really getting into Yoshihashi either, because he's been around for so long and we know what his role is. We understand what his role is in New Japan. That at some point we're like, well, okay, it's nice that he's getting a nice little run, but we know he's going to hit a wall at some point. And the wall has been hit, and he's probably going to lose all of his following matches. So there's no one standing out. And it goes back to the point I was making last week when I was talking about how when I was lamenting the lack of use of the young guys and how they're not developing an ace for this company, right? And, I posited, threw the theory out there that, okay, on one hand, sure, none of these guys seem to be, as we like to say, grabbing this opportunity by the throat and making this tournament theirs. But at the same time, I also asked the question, how much is it? How much is it just the young guys not stepping up, and how much is it the booking that is not giving any room for any of these guys to stand out, to allow them to grab it by the throat, if we continue calling it that way, right? And when I look at the layout of the G1 right now, I sort of shrug and I go, well, I mean, there's clearly a creative problem here. There's something happening right now that creative is hindering any of these guys to step forward. Now, did some of these younger guys, the Reiwa 3 +1 +2, have they been having good tournaments? Well, a lot of them have, quite frankly. And they've been looking very good. We'll talk about that, very shortly. But you cannot look at this tournament and go, all right, these are the guys we have to follow. Clear. This is the guy the company is throwing their support behind, right? Was the last time that New Japan did this was Sonata, that one year where he just ate through everyone in the block when he was world champion. Was it that moment? And have they had cold feet since because Sonata turned out to be a complete and utter flop? Did they have cold feet and decide not to do it anymore? But the difference is that Sonata as world champion, most people, most observers had spotted it. A lot of us were very skeptical at a world champion Sonata, and we all gave him a fair chance, and he just turned out to be Sonata, just plain old Sonata. So maybe he wasn't the best choice to do that with, but they've got some very solid choices on this roster where they could absolutely decide to do this with Yota Tsuji, with Yumera, with Takeshita. These are all guys who could be running away with the prize right now. You want it to be bold? Throw Oiwa in there, right? So I feel like there's a lot more credence to my theory, to my thoughts, maybe is probably the better word than theory, that, it might not be entirely just up to the young guys. There might be forces at work that are creating a direction in which the young guys don't have the opportunities to stand out like they did. And I think that's extremely plausible. But it's like, I don't understand why this parody booking is happening. I don't know why we're doing it again. It wasn't interesting last year, and it's much less interesting this year, I find. Where I think fans are just looking to be able to latch on to one of their favorites running away with a big tournament, right? We can always ponder the question, was Gabe Kidd one of the anointed ones this year? And that, sure, I don't know, probably not. I mean, it's hard to say. It's impossible to say, really. It's so incredibly hard to say now that everything's been rebooked. We'll never know. We'll never know what the original plans were. And I'm saying probably not for Gabe Kidd, not because I don't think Gabe Kidd could be one of these top guys for the company. I think he absolutely could, and he absolutely should be one of these guys running away with everything right now. It's just that, this is how they've been treating their new crop of wrestlers for years now. It's just the same scenario. And I understand that the booking patterns in New Japan are slower than everywhere else. I understand that. I've been watching it long enough to know. But again, I feel like we're starting to retread stuff that we discussed already last week. But New Japan don't have the luxury to go slow anymore. You've lost all of your major stars, your big pillars, right? Okada and Ospreay left. Jay White is gone. Hiroshi Tanahashi's done at the at the start of the new year. Tetsuya Naito's gone away, although there's a feeling he'll be back, but that's probably a topic for another podcast, not specifically for this right here. So there's stuff happening right now that should be raising alarm bells, that should have the company going, yeah, you know what, we should step it up. We need to accelerate this because, whoosh. We need to get some, we need, who's going to fill out the Tokyo Dome for us, right? Because you can't depend on all the old guys. So, I understand the argument, and I've seen it with my own eyes. Yes, New Japan booking takes longer. Yes, I understand that. But they don't have the luxury to do that. And we've talked about this more than enough. It's like, the parody booking is dull. Ultimately, I think, like, outside of the situation with the talent, that they don't seem to be able to screw it on tight and do something with the talent. As a viewer, as someone who enjoys pro wrestling, and who wants to get into the G1, there's really nothing to sink your teeth into. It's kind of boring. And I feel like, it's a very simple structure to tell a story with, right? With 3 guys advancing, especially, since we're having playoffs now and 3 guys per block advance, this is what you do. You tell 2 stories. There's 2 stories really to tell throughout a G1 per block. You say, who gets the bye? Who wins the block, essentially, who gets the bye, and who sneaks in at third. Those are the 2 stories that you should be telling. And your dominant players should be established early on, because these are the guys upon which you will likely be depending on to sell tickets for your semifinals and finals, more than likely. And then you get, then you can have a real war for a 3rd spot, and that can be really compelling. That can be a lot of fun. But you don't need 6 guys of the block vying for first. That just dilutes everything. Because the blocks now, they just look the same. The blocks ultimately are just like, just log jams of a ton of guys with all. Are we saying that nothing is really competitive, that everyone is on the same footing? Is this the message that we're trying to send to the viewership? Is that, look, everyone is just as good. It's really hard for anyone to break out of the pack because everyone is just as good. I say bullshit. Bullshit on that. There should be people breaking away. Those are the people that you get excited about, that sell tickets, and that folks can get behind. Because the big picture here is that New Japan still hasn't created its next top star. And this G1 didn't necessarily favor that. They didn't give us a clear direction. Yes, there's people who are having great tournaments. Yes, there have been fantastic matches. There have been great matches in this tournament. Okay? Absolutely. I'm behind that. But there's no one that's breaking away as an ace. There's no top stars. It's August, and we still don't know who's carrying this promotion into the final, third of the year to lead us to the big show at the Tokyo Dome. And in my circles, all everyone is talking about is Aaron Wolf and what his impact is going to be. And Aaron Wolf, hasn't even appeared once, but everyone's talking. It's like, oh, Aaron Wolf, that's a guy we're excited to see how he's going to fall into place. Because look, it's like I said last week, and it bears repeating, right? For us Westerners, all we can do is listen to the Japanese fans and those who are plugged into Japanese culture and who tell us Aaron Wolf, mainstream star, Olympic star, like everyone knows who he is. So he has crossover appeal, and we can understand why New Japan wants to use him and bring him on board, because he has that crossover appeal. Right? Don't forget, his match at Wrestle Kingdom is going to be broadcast on TV Asahi. They're going to show that match for free on TV. That's how big a deal Aaron Wolf is for the mainstream Japanese market. But like I said, if Aaron Wolf even remotely picks up wrestling well, like if he is even remotely a good little wrestler, there are people on this roster whose spots are immediately in danger. I have no idea how he's faring. They're unquestionably keeping his training regimen and his progress under lock and key. They don't want any fucking leaks. They don't want anyone talking about it as to whether he's picking it up well or if he stinks. They don't want any of that. So I don't know how good he's doing, but just imagine if you're a Yota Tsuji, you're a Ryohei Oiwa, you're a Gabe Kidd, You're a Shota Umino, and this guy's specter is looming over the company, who they are clearly putting a lot of work into. They are putting a lot of work and unquestionably a lot of money into. They want this project to work. This is not a one-off, guest appearance. This isn't Jelly Roll showing up. This is a guy that they want to have compete on the roster. If he picks wrestling up even with even the slightest amount of talent, there's a lot of people who are in danger on that roster. There's a lot of people who are in danger. And again, if I'm Shota Umino, if I'm Gabe Kidd, Yota Tsuji, Ryohei Oiwa, I'm like, ugh, this is not. Ugh, I'm sweating a bit. I'm sweating it a bit. Maybe the spot that I thought I was going to have isn't as guaranteed as it is. And maybe I start wondering. Maybe I'm start wondering what is the vision, the booking vision, because they're not making anyone right now. They are not formulating any stars for New Japan in this G1. Everyone is booked the same. Everyone is booked the same. Does that make sense to you? That everyone is booked the same? That Yoshihashi has more points than Shingo Takagi, is in arm's reach of Zack Sabre Jr. and Konosuke Takeshita? Does that make sense to you? That the block that contains, Yota Tsuji, Yuya Uemura, and Ryohei Oiwa, and Bolton Oleg. There's another guy we forget about. They're all tied. Oh, each of us are as good as the other. Isn't that sweet? No, it's not. It's not a show of solidarity here. You want someone to break off, to pull away from the pack and become fucking awesome. So I'm kind of disappointed that this is the scenario we end up in. And yes, it's prevalent in A block. There's, no one is eliminated. No one, like I said, I understand you're going to have drama on the last night of block action, but in the meantime, it's pretty fucking tiresome. And there's no one to root for. There's just no one to root for. Anywho, let's go through a few more thoughts here. I told you, right? David Finlay was not done. I told you all. I told you that David Finlay would not be cast away from the tournament. Rough start, but then he'd come back. He'd start winning matches. Told you all not to count him out. Mathematically, he's still alive. And if he wins his last two matches, he has an extremely strong possibility, because again, it's hard to predict because there's so much fucking goofiness happening in Block A. He has a very good chance to qualify. He has a very, very good chance. Now, the thing is that on the last night of action for A block, which is going to be on the 15th, Finlay is going to be fighting Yuya Uemura. Now, this has the potential to be a very do or die match here. It has that vibe because these are two guys right now who are, of course, in the logjam, but are two guys that very logically could be perceived as dudes who will move forward in the tournament and will go to the playoffs. But they're both in the same situation points-wise. Well, not exactly in the same situation. Uemura has 8 and Finlay has 6. So I can absolutely see a situation where Uemura and Finlay win their matches on night 13. Uemura then would have 10 points. Finlay would have 8. And then come into night 15. And David Finlay wins, ties him for 10, but he has then he has the tiebreaker, so he qualifies. He moves on. Or maybe both of them will qualify at 10 apiece, regardless, right? Because there's 3 people moving forward. So I would absolutely not rule David Finlay out yet. But the thing is when you look at who's tied at 8, right? You have Yota Tsuji, who a lot of people are expecting to qualify, right? Yuya Uemura, another guy that you can absolutely say should qualify. Evil, Evil is one of these guys that Gedo likes to throw into these situations, into these playoffs to add some color, right? He could be. Boltin Oleg. There's another guy that could. Same thing with Ryohei Oiwa, but maybe not as strong. But Ryohei Oiwa is one of the only guys left in the tournament here that has a clear path on Block A, who has a clear path to 12 points. Oiwa could just sneak in and win the last 2 nights. He's wrestling, let me see here. He's wrestling Yuya. He's wrestling Yuya on night 13. So that's one situation there. And you could assume, right? You could assume that Yuya is going to win, but he could also logically lose here, and then the stakes get really, really high when he's facing David Finlay. So Oiwa could win on the 13, and Oiwa could also. Oh, wait, I'm not sorry here. I'm not on the right night. Night 15. He's facing Sonata, who technically is someone who he should be able to beat, although Sonata could play spoiler. Don't get me wrong. That could absolutely be a thing. Technically speaking, Ryohei Oiwa should be able to, get rid of Sonata. So he's the only person here who really has a clear path to 12 points. I think a guy like Yuya, his path is not as clear. Yota Tsuji on the 13 is going to be fighting David Finlay. And I really think David Finlay is not losing any more matches. So, Yuya is, not Yuya, excuse me, Yoda is quite likely not going to is probably not going to make it to 12. Boltin Oleg has a match against Taichi on the 15, and then on the 13, he has a match against Evil. There's a very good chance that he loses his match to Evil. I feel Oiwa has a really solid case to winning the block, to being the guy who gets the bye. Got a little ahead of myself. Okay, not going to lie. Let's talk about advancement scenarios in a little bit, but I did want to talk a little bit when it came to Dave Finlay, because Finlay does have a circumstance where he could win his last 2 matches, or he could not qualify at all. Because don't forget the story that, at least in English commentary, the story that they were telling regarding Finlay was that he's, there's some doubt that's being raised in regards to him as will he be considered one of the great Bullet Club leaders if he cannot win a G1 Climax, right? So maybe, that's the story, that he cannot win a G1 Climax, and maybe that's the tale that they want to tell. We'll see, of course, very, very shortly how that all turns out, but you never discount Dave Finlay. Not in the way Gedo books this stuff, not in the way that Gedo actually likes David Finlay. You just can't throw him out with the bathwater. He always has to be in the conversation. Some highlight performances, or at least performers at the very least, from the past week. I think right now Yota Tsuji is at his most interesting that he has been in a long time. Not since his debut, which just took everyone by surprise, and where it was just like a flashbang. We were all flashbanged when he showed up that night and to challenge Sonata. We were like, holy shit. I think that, look, his crowd connection has become much more solid. He's always had one, but I think it's become better because I think now he's emoting better too. He's going for the crowd connection a lot more. And I think his work has become a lot more urgent. I think it's something we talked about last week, if I remember correctly. But there's a lot more urgency in what he does. He's still a guy who likes to take his time, be poised, but he doesn't like have it all put together. He doesn't connect his explosiveness to his moments where he's being a little more methodical. He hasn't found that bridge yet. However, I feel like he's being more and more explosive, acting like a babyface probably should. And I think it's translating really, really well in his matches. I think he's been having really good matches. He's been fantastic throughout the tournament. Look, he's been in a lot of main events, mostly in main events and semi-main events. I'd be shocked if he doesn't qualify. I think this is a guy that they told us from the start. Look, he's going to be a player throughout this G1. And sometimes you can look back to these signals that Gedo sends, depending on the positioning where he places people. Yota Tsuji didn't spend much time curtain jerking this G1. He really didn't. But he's been phenomenal. Konosuke Takeshita, of course. It's just here's it's the same thing as I said last week. It's a guy who understands what the mission is. He understands what the mandate is. He hits the ring and delivers one of the most consistently old school G1 performances that you could wish for. And he's tremendous. He's great. He delivers in top spots all the time. Look, he's my pick. He was my pick to win from the get-go. I legitimately think that this guy heads to the Tokyo Dome and main events it. We've had this discussion, and we will have this discussion again when he wins, because there will be people who will be upset. They will be pointing at the AEW dual contract. It's a triple contract with DDT, but you know what I'm talking about. They're going to point to that and say, AEW doing whatever they want. Then somehow all of this will be Tony Khan's fault. And I will point to the entire roster and I will say, if not Konosuke Takeshita, who, if not Takeshita, to be in the main event of the Tokyo Dome? Moving on. Yuya Uemura. I think he's his tournament has been just getting better and better. Bringing everything together. He's so good. Like, I really appreciate how, most of his gimmick is just like, most of his, and I say gimmick, maybe that's not the right word. Most of his in-ring ability, I guess, is his presentation. It's all about fundamentals. Uemura is like, I have such great fundamentals. I will do whatever the hell I want with you with an arm drag. And I love it. I think he's great. And here's another guy who I think his stock is rising. To harp on my original point once again, like, imagine Yota Tsuji or imagine this guy if they were given the keys to the kingdom here. We're like, all right, guys, go out there and just kick some ass. Just go do it. Just destroy tear the house down whatever spot you're on. You guys are the anointed ones, right? Imagine how much more crowd connection there would be for these guys if they were just going out there and kicking ass all the time. Imagine. Pro wrestling fans usually really love ass kickers. Just saying. Here, look, Hiroshi Tanahashi is absolutely gutting it out in 2025, for as much as his body will allow him to do. He's squeezing every last ounce of juice out of what he's got left to give. And fuck, it's not a lot, but he's had some legitimately great matches on this tour. He has been phenomenal. And he's had phenomenal dance partners, which he has taken the opportunity to elevate as well. Like he started off kind of iffy, It was a little so-so. He had his great match with Tai Chi. At first, had a couple of little squeakers, but then, he's got his Yumera match, his match with Tsuji. Those were absolutely phenomenal. I'm a little impressed, quite frankly, at how good Tanahashi is for the physical state he's in, right? He's not like, it's not suddenly like 2013 Ace of the Universe. It's 2025 Hiroshi Tanahashi, bow-legged without any knees. It is what it is. But he is delivering on a much higher level than I expected. Much, much higher. And look, maybe he's not drawing the numbers to the building for his last G1, But as far as his in-ring goes, there's not much to complain about. And then Tai Chi, I think, has been consistent. He's been versatile. He's been carrying a lot of the matches. A guy who goes out and works extra hard all the time. One of the remnants of the golden age. This is another guy who understands the mandate, right? Who knows what a G1 is supposed to look like and feel like, and he goes out there. He's tremendous. Again, we'll reiterate the point from last week. It's practically unfathomable at this point. That Tai Chi was, that Tai Chi wasn't even considered to be in the tournament this year. That it took 2 rounds of play-in matches for him to be added to the tournament, which is wild. So, lots of good performances, and overall, this is a solid tournament. Don't get me wrong. I think this is a tournament that overall is delivering on the moments where it should. Like, it's nothing exceptional. Solid is the right word. But again, no breakout performer, no breakout guy to wrap your head around and go, okay, well, there you go. We're making someone here. Anyway, this would be the moment where we should be talking about advancement scenarios, right? This is the moment where we should be talking about who's going to be eliminated and who's going to make it. But again, this parity booking is completely dissolving the capacity to do this without losing your mind. Block A, impossible to know who is going to move forward. It's just, you can sort of like when we were talking a little earlier about Dave Finlay and Ryohei Oiwa, like there's possibilities, but there's nothing set in stone. There's nothing here. Even if I wanted to open up the floodgates and tell you all, okay, well, block A, this is how it's going to go. We'd be sitting here all night or all day, depending on when you're listening to this, breaking down paths to success for 6 guys, 8 guys, easily. No one wants to do that. Those are mathematical equations and computations that my brain is not equipped to deal with. And besides, what a waste of time. There's too many plausible outs here. There's no point in doing it. Now, when it comes to, so block A is, sorry to say, and it's really, really boring to say, but it's anybody's game. I think the only real shoo-in, I feel, is Yota Tsuji, because, like I said, he's been in a lot of big matches. He's been in quite a bit of main events, semi-main events. Hasn't been doing a lot of curtain jerking. If you had any money to bet, I'd bet it on Huge Stooge. Now, his last night on the 15th is going to be against Callum Newman. That might also be a sign that he's not qualifying because he's going to be in a nothing match. But I'd be surprised. I'd be shocked. The one to circle to keep your eyes on the 15 is Yuya Uemura and David Finlay. That one assuredly will have some will have some implications. Assuredly. I'm confident that it's going to be an important match. But aside from that, Block A, sayonara. Block B, there's a lot of scenarios for Block B as well. And less, but there's still a lot. With a bunch of guys with, a ton of points that could still like all tie each other up at 10 points and whatnot. Like, there's a path here that exists where let's say you don't want Ren Narita in the final, in the playoffs, right? We're done with Ren Narita. Thank you. We don't want you running around with your push-up bar and doing nonsense with the House of Torture and having Kanemaru ring the bell and all this bullshit. Let's say you wanted Narita out, and let's say you wanted Shingo in, which I think, I don't think they're going to put Shingo into it because they clearly don't want to push Shingo anymore. But let's say Shingo Takagi, who everyone was led to believe was eliminated today, is not. How far could he go? Well, I'm glad you asked. If Shingo wins his next two matches, therefore, if he wins on the 14th against Ren Narita and he wins on the 16th against Drilla Maloney, that will give him 10 points. By defeating Ren Narita, he will ensure that Ren's max amount of points he can get is 10. Oh no, and Ren, excuse me, because Ren already has 10 points, excuse me. Then Ren will have to lose his last two matches. He will have to lose against Shingo and against Konosuke Takeshita on night 13. If Ren loses those two matches and Shingo wins his two, Shingo moves forward, but only if, on top of that, Konosuke Takeshita and Zack Sabre Jr. win their two matches. And why is that, you say? I'm glad you asked. If we go back to night 14, Zack Sabre Jr. will be facing Drilla Maloney, and I think that's a win there. And Konosuke Takeshita will be facing Shota Umino, and that will be important to keeping Shota down. And then Zack will, if he defeats Yoshihashi on the last night, then he gets up there at 14 points. Konosuke Takeshita gets up there at 14 as well. And then that clears the path for Shingo to win with 10 points. And he would win with 10 points despite being tied with Shota Umino because he has the tiebreaker on him and Ren Narita as well. So that then hoists him up to qualify for the playoffs. Zack Sabre Jr. would get the bye because he'd have the tiebreaker on Takeshita. So Takeshita and Shingo would meet in the playoffs, and Zack Sabre Jr. would then Takeshita and Shingo would meet in the playoffs, and then Zack Sabre Jr. and Takeshita so Zack Sabre Jr. would get the bye, and Takeshita and Shingo would then move on to face the opposing their opposing team, the opposing block's playoff ease representatives. So there you go. So there you go from top to bottom. I mean, look, there's as I said, many more paths here, but I don't think it's compelling to sit around and break them down when there's so many and no one is standing out, and I don't think it's compelling radio. I don't think it's compelling audio to do that kind of stuff. So we'll just leave it at that. And when we all meet up again next week, well, we'll have another vision. We'll be able to see how this all played out, and hopefully this will be the last year that they do this. As for match recommendations, I have a few for you as well to add on top of the ones I gave you previously last week. Starting on July 30th, Zack Sabre Jr. versus Konosuke Takeshita which was absolutely phenomenal. Just a phenomenal match. David Finlay versus Bolton Oleg as well on August the 1st. August the 1st was probably the best night of G1 action, quite honestly. So, because we had that match, we had Tai Chi versus Yota Tsuji, which was incredible as well, and Yuya Uemura versus Hiroshi Tanahashi, which was another spectacular match. Like all three of those were fantastic. If there was one night of G1 action where you were like, I'm going to sit down and watch the whole thing, there you go, right there. That's the one. August the 3rd, we had Tanahashi versus Yota Tsuji, which was great. And Zack Sabre Jr. versus Shingo Takagi from earlier today on August the 5th, which was tremendous. Those would be my solid recommendations if you just want to watch some really good G1 matches. So there you have it. That's our weekly wrap up for this week of the G1 Climax 35. Again, next week it's going to be probably rather light. We'll see what kind of content we're able to extract out of it, but it's coming to an end. G1 Climax, it's almost done. We're this close to getting the big winner this year, so keep your eyes peeled. I'll be around once again to break it on down next week. Yeah. And that about wraps it up for another edition of the Mr. Warren Hayes Show. Thank you very much once again for listening, especially to the very end here. I appreciate it a great deal. 5-star reviews, 5-star Spotify things, and 5-star likes, and all the great stuff that you can show some love for the podcast is tremendous and appreciated, and thank you in advance for doing it. I will be back on Thursday, tomorrow, for another AEW Dynamite review. We'll probably be streaming as well. If you want to be part of this streaming stuff that we do, and it's a lot of fun, be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. That way you won't miss an opportunity, and you have to do the bell gimmick too, just to make sure you really don't miss a single thing. So that way you'll be subscribed, you'll get the things, and then you can join us in the chat, and it's really, really lively, and we'd really like to have you. So thank you very much for everything. Thank you so much for everything, but it's specifically, thank you so much for listening this week. I will be back next week if all else fails, and go watch from Randy Orton and get back to me, and I'll see you next time.